Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to the webinar. I'm Andy Reese. We're going to get started in just a minute. We're just going to give everybody another minute or two to get logged in. So thanks for your patience. Appreciate you logging in on time. And we'll give everybody just another minute and then we'll get rolling with our presentation today. Thanks everybody for joining. Hey, thanks everybody for joining. Still see some folks logging in, so we're just going to give everybody another minute to get themselves online with us before we get started. So thanks for your patience. Hey everybody, Andy Reese here with Route For Me. Just going to give it about another 20 seconds here and then we'll get started with our presentation, just giving everybody a chance to get themselves logged in with us. So thanks for your patience. All right, well, we'll get rolling now. Well, welcome everybody and thanks for joining us. This is the third session in our webinar series around driving business excellence, efficiency, and sustainability through last mile transportation. And today's session is all about what we call last mile math, or how to use data, metrics, and analytics to drive smarter decisions in last mile logistics. My name is Andy Reese, and I'm going to be your guide for today's conversation, but I am also joined by two of our last mile experts here at Route For Me, Jason Johnson and Sean Stinson, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So Jason, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jason Johnson, and I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships here at Route For Me. So appreciate you guys taking some time out of your day to join us for some of this great and insightful information.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Now let's meet Sean Stinson with our team. Sean?
Hey guys, Sean Stinson. I run our reseller partnership channel, and I've been with Route For Me now, and it's just at 7 years, and been in telematics world for 25. So, looking forward to sharing this important information with you guys, and hopefully providing you the information you're looking for to make your next decision.
Great. Thanks, Sean. We do have a lot of great content to cover. So in the interest of staying on track, I'd ask if you do have questions, just jot them down, and you can also enter them into the Q&A section as we go. And then we have reserved some time at the end to answer everyone's questions. So before we dive in, just a quick snapshot about Route For Me. We were founded back in 2009, and we've grown into a global software company with more than 175 staff around the world. We've built out a world-class last mile transportation and route optimization platform that's been trusted by more than 40,000 customers to optimize more than 3 billion miles of road. And our platform is 100% cloud-based and fully API capable and offers seamless integration with your existing systems. And we do provide 24/7, 365, 5-star customer support. And we have routing and route optimization experts like Sean and Jason that work day in and day out with folks just like yourself to help organizations like yours master last mile complexity. Okay. Well, with that out of the way, here's a quick look at what we're going to cover today. We'll talk about what we mean by last mile math, put some definition around that term. We'll talk about how companies are using last mile math to improve their operations and their performance. And we'll also show how companies are gaining, we're going to talk about strategic insights that help them make smarter decisions about how to grow, how to better manage their business. And finally, we'll talk about how you can get started using last mile math. So what exactly is last mile math? Well, at its core, it starts with everything that goes into your last mile operation. So it's the vehicles, it's the drivers, customer orders, business rules, data from telematics. And then on the other hand, you have all the metrics around performance. So we're talking about things like route compliance, time window compliance, the distance that your vehicles are traveling, vehicle utilization, and so on. And so what last mile math is about is using all these data and metrics to make really the invisible visible. And because why do we need last mile math? It's because without the math, last mile logistics, it can feel more like an art form, right? It feels more like you're making gut decisions and you're basing your decisions on tribal knowledge. But what we hope to show you today is that with the right data and the right tools, it can become a science. You can really quantify what's working, identify what's not working, and then make progress and measure that progress over time. And of course, preaching to the choir here, I know, but it's especially important because the last mile is really one of the most complex and costly and customer visible parts of the supply chain. And if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, you can't manage it, you're really leaving money and service quality on the table. And we hope to help you better manage it with some of the suggestions that we'll make today. So let's pause here and kind of ground ourselves in the big idea. It's not about loving math, even though the title of the presentation is around last mile math. It's really about unlocking value, and the numbers are just a means to that end. So what we're really after is the insight that is going to help make better decisions, whether that's day to day, quarter to quarter, year over year. And we're going to talk about two types of insight today, operational and strategic. And both really are critical to improving your operations. So operational insight is all about your daily execution. Are your drivers staying on route? Are stops being serviced on time? Are you hitting the promised service or time windows for your customers? Is service time at each stop what you expected? So by comparing plan versus actual performance, you start to uncover those small inefficiencies that gum up the business and that add up, unnecessary mileage, delays, workflow breakdowns. And here's the key, really. The operational insight gives you the power to course correct in near real time. So you can retrain drivers, you can re-optimize your routes or update business rules before the inefficiencies scale and really start to hurt the business. Now, on the strategic side, we shift from looking backward to looking forward. So here's where we move into scenario modeling, what-if simulations. You might ask yourselves, what have we added at depot? What have we changed our delivery windows? What have we consolidated some of our service zones or trimmed our fleet? So it's using real performance data as your foundation to simulate those changes and project their financial and operational impact before you commit to a decision. So that means better investment decisions, smarter resource allocation, stronger alignment amongst the different functions within your company. And the bottom line is that the operational insight helps get you better at what you're already doing, and the strategic insights helps you reimagine what's possible. And together, they form the foundation of continuous improvement and long-term growth in the business. So here's a simple example of what last mile math looks like in practice. And we'll have many more examples coming up with Jason and Sean, but just want to give you kind of a simple example. And for this one, we're using the route editor view in Route for Me. So we planned out a route that covered 7 stops over 85 miles, and the blue line shows where the driver stuck to our route plan, but then we see the red line that shows where the driver deviated from the planned route. So the total distance that the driver covered wound up being more than 100 miles instead of 85 miles. So like about a quarter again as much. So that's extra mileage, extra wear and tear on the vehicle, extra hours, maybe overtime, and short, extra cost. So having access to these kinds of plan versus actual metrics allow us to go back and understand what led to that deviation. Maybe there was some road restrictions or issues that prevented the driver from completing the route as planned, or maybe there was some other reason for the deviation. But regardless of the reason, we now have the insights that we need to go back and fix the issue so that we can get our driver back in compliance with our planned route, or to understand that this was a one-off instance and that there was just an issue that caused the driver to make this deviation, and it's not going to be an issue moving forward. So either way, we know whether we need to take action, and if we need to take action, we'll have a basis for taking that action based on actual facts. Just a quick note about who uses last mile math, and really what we've seen is that everyone has a stake in this. It's really cross-functional. So operation managers who are involved in the last mile on a daily basis, they use last mile math to track and improve driver performance, route compliance, like in the example that we just looked at. As we'll see later, executives can use it to see the financial impact of operational decisions, plan investments, align operations with growth goals. Finance can use it to budget, track ROI. Sales can use it even, as we'll see with Sean later in the presentation. Sales can use it to build better proposals, smarter SLA commitments, and so forth. Customer service can use it to improve the customer experience. So let's get into then these two different kinds of insights that we mentioned earlier and start walking through some examples. And we'll start with examples of how companies can access and use operational insights. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Johnson to walk us through some concrete examples. So Jason?
All right, awesome, Andy. Thank you very much. So for those of you who use the system already, this is our Business Insights, which is a new release in the platform. So we're excited to kind of put that in front of our customers. If you don't use Route for Me, this is one of the reporting aspects of what we have in the platform to help you get better data. So to kind of reiterate, but also visit the purpose of what this is. We always tell our customers and our future customers and people we talk to on a regular basis that it's important to remember that optimization is a journey. It's not a destination. It's a path of continual improvement. Kind of like there is no such thing as perfect. There's really only operationally viable for you, and that's what this specific area is designed to give you. So in this example, what we're looking at is a very concise view of a lot of different data points boiled down into a way that it will help the business ask better and different questions. There's things that we might want to look at and try and figure out based on the outputs. So a couple things like, and a concrete example of what I'm talking about, if we look at the square that's highlighted, we're basically seeing that we have some deviations. Now, in most instances, when people think of colors, they think green is good, red is bad, and yellow is somewhere in the middle. In this dashboard, it's important to understand that we're not necessarily using them in that way. We're really using them as ways to call out degrees of importance. So, for example, if something is red, it usually means it's fallen outside what is statistically acceptable, and you should take a look at it. It could be an exception. It means it's worth looking at. Yellow is the same thing. It's like a cautionary tale, and it's something that we should look at, but that also might be on the positive side. And then the same thing applies to green. So green might be good, green might be bad. It just means there's a deviation big enough that we should want to look at it. So in the area that's squared up right here, you'll notice it says arrivals. And essentially what this data is saying is that our driver, Howard, essentially is arriving 33% of the time early. So what does early mean? Early means that he is outside of 5 minutes of his planned arrival time. So a concrete example, if he was supposed to arrive at noon and he arrived at 11:50, he's now 10 minutes early. That would constitute an early arrival. And that might be awesome. That might be perfectly acceptable according to plan, and he is ahead of schedule and life is fabulous. However, there could be a scenario where arriving early could mean that the business isn't open yet, or maybe he doesn't have access, or there's a piece of equipment he needs that isn't readily available. And now he's having to wait. That might not be as interesting an answer, but might be something that you'd want to look into. The same thing applies for late. The deviation, if you look at Derek in this example, he is late 61.5% of the time. And what that essentially means is that he is outside of 5 minutes past the planned arrival time. So that's another part of giving us insights in terms of where we should look to be able to ask questions. Now, that might not necessarily mean that Derek is super late. Derek might just be arriving because of traffic, and it might have been a bad weather day or anything along those lines. In this particular scenario, however, the data we're looking at is a trailing month. So over an entire month, he is historically 61.5% late on his arrival times. We need to look at that and ask ourselves questions. So there's more of this we can kind of look into and see different things. So slide. On the next slide, for example, we'll look at time windows. So if you use Route for Me, and some of you use it at different levels, I actually took a scroll through our attendees and I see some names and people that I recognize, and I'm super stoked you guys are here joining us. This might be a little redundant for you, but I like to define a time window. So a time window is a customer specific restriction. The customer has said to the service provider, hey, service provider, whether delivery or field service, you have to be at my location within this specified window of time. So that window of time could be 1 hour, 2 hours, 15 minutes, 10 hours, whatever it is, but it is a restriction. So I have to be there between 8 and 10. I have to be there between 9 and 10. I have to be there between 12 and 1, whatever that example is. And what we're able to see here is we're able to see that the time window success and failure rate. So now time windows in Route for Me, especially for those of you who are customers using this, it's important to understand is a different metric. I said that early arrivals and late departures and late arrivals, I'm sorry, had a 5-minute window of forgiveness. The time windows do not. Currently, time windows are binary, meaning that you either make it or you don't. For a 12 noon time window, if you arrive at 11:59, you are early, but that also means you missed the time window. So it is very binary in our example. What this is telling us is it's actually telling us that Howard has missed his time windows 3/4 of the 2/3 of the time. He's only made his time window 1/3 of the time. So we should ask questions as to why that is. If we look at Brian Mitchell, for example, the entirety of this data set in that one line actually tells us a story. And it's about how we read it and how we interpret from the data that tells us where to go look. So if you look at it at the surface, Brian missed 84.6% of his time windows. Crikeys, that is a lot. However, if we go and look in the column next to it under reported service time, he's actually ahead in his service time by 96%. So he's actually ahead of schedule. And so what's happening, if you remember in my example, I said if he arrives at 11:59, it's considered a missed time window because the time window opened at noon. In this example, Brian is early. He's actually beating his arrival time by minutes or multiple minutes, and therefore he's getting flagged as missing his time window. So not necessarily a bad thing. In an operational environment, being a minute or 2 minutes early could be perfectly acceptable. It could be fine. So it opens the door and opens the aperture for you to ask different and better questions. It does not necessarily mean that there is a problem. Slide. So the really neat thing is this isn't all and this isn't everything, but as I mentioned on, using the different aspects and elements to look at, things like detected service time versus reported service time, also tells a story. So we now know, for example, that Brian was ahead of schedule, which is interesting. So we also know that he was reporting being ahead of schedule, but he reported being ahead of schedule like a significant amount. But detected service time is in our platform a way that we actually look at how long the vehicle is on site versus how long the person has told us they've actually done or performed their service, and we compare it and contrast. So what that actually leads to is the ability to understand if my driver was supposed to be on site and was supposed to do 15 minutes of work. However, if the vehicle stayed on site for 45 minutes, we should have a conversation about that 30 minutes of vehicle just kind of hanging out. Like, why was that? Was he doing paperwork? Was he having a chat with one of his friends? We don't know, but it gives us a way to go look into those things. The other beautiful thing about the platform is this dashboard and this information, which can be broken down in so many different ways, is also available via CSV download. So you can pull this down, drop it into a spreadsheet, use it in Excel or Google Sheets, or maybe if you have a more sophisticated reporting engine like Tableau or Power BI or Snowflake or a data lake, you can grab this information and manipulate it in a bunch of different ways. So again, it's really all about asking questions and giving you some examples of how looking at this data can actually paint multiple different pictures, leading you to ask different questions. Slide. So in a final closing, kind of outlay in recapping the data that I talked about, we can see here in a really simplified format what that worked out to be. So if we look at the two examples that are highlighted, we can see, for example, that the average service time detected for Howard and the average planned service time, like all lined up. Howard was perfectly on time. He was 50, it was 15 minutes, 15 minutes, and 15 minutes. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. However, if we look at Vernon, we can see that the planned average service time per stop was 15 minutes. However, on average, Vernon was taking 22 minutes. And there was deviations between that data. So it leads us to ask our questions. Did we set Vernon up for success? Is 15 minutes reasonable for Vernon to have done the work, or is it not? Or is Vernon just taking longer than Howard? We don't know. But those are the questions we should ask, or we should have a reasonable expectation as to what and how they line up. So this is just another simple but cleaner, slightly different example, all including numbers about how we can do some last mile math to help us ask bigger, better questions, leading us down that path of continual improvement. Because ultimately, that's really what we want. Better, smoother, more efficient business operations lead to happier clients, which lead to healthy and sustained growth. Thank you for your time and attention. I'll turn it back over to Andy.
Awesome, Jason, thanks. And Jason will be back in the Q&A section. So if you have questions for Jason about what he's just discussed, please feel free to enter those or any other questions in the Q&A tab, and we'll work on those in the Q&A section at the end. And just playing off of what Jason was talking about, just wanted to give a few examples here of how some customers that we've worked with have used last mile math to address different issues that they found in their last mile operations. So here's an example of one company that used last mile math to address a recurring problem that they had with failed deliveries. This is a parcel and delivery service that we work with. Once they started tracking the data closely, they realized that there were some specific repeatable causes behind some of the failures that they were seeing. And in some cases, the recipient just wasn't home. In other cases, a required signature couldn't be obtained. But they also learned that if their volume was low for a certain territory, their operator might just opt to deliver the package on the following day. And so what they're doing is using these insights to adjust their workflows and policies to make sure that they're meeting their delivery commitments and maintaining their high customer service rankings. In this case, this was a commercial water services company that used Ralph Remy's performance metrics to drive some cultural and behavior change across their operations. They started by analyzing the core data points on things like on-time delivery rates and route compliance and customer feedback. And then with that, they built a profile of what their top performers were doing, what the top performance really looked like based on the real world numbers and not just assumptions. And from there, they used all that information to launch a two-part program. First, they implemented a driver reward system that recognized consistent high performers. And second, they used the same data to identify underperformers and then deliver some targeted coaching and training. And it wasn't about punishing people or taking punitive measures. It was about building a culture of accountability where success had a clear definition, it was celebrated, and where every team member knew how their performance stacked up. And then finally, this example comes from a B2B distributor that was having some issues with late deliveries and was challenged by rising fuel cost. So they used Route for Me to dig into their route compliance data and comparing the plan path with the actual GPS traces from the driver, similar to the example that I gave earlier. And what they found was that certain drivers were consistently deviating from the planned routes, either out of habit because they just were used to going a certain way, or because they believed that they could beat the GPS and save time. And the irony was that these deviations were often causing more delays and burning more fuel. And so with this insight, they re-optimized some specific routes that were experiencing poor compliance. And they also rolled out some driver coaching to reinforce the importance of following the optimized plan. And they implemented some ongoing monitoring to make sure that the improvements stuck. And so the results that they saw was a drop in fuel consumption by 12%, on-time delivery rates climbed above 95%. So it's a good example of how these small and targeted changes rooted in solid data can deliver really outsized returns in terms of both cost savings and customer satisfaction. So that's operational insight. So now let's shift gears and shift to long-term thinking. And as we talked about earlier, last mile math is not just about today, it's about looking forward to the future. It's about gaining strategic insights from your performance data that let you simulate changes in your operating model so that you can make smarter decisions about how to evolve and grow your business. So we talked before about understanding the inputs that go into planning and scheduling your routes. And you have all these business rules and constraints that you apply, whether it's things like avoidance zones or time windows or constraints like multiple depots or changing fleet sizes. Any of those things that make planning the last mile such a challenge. And when you're thinking about modeling scenarios for how to evolve your operations, you're weighing which of those rules and constraints to tweak to get whatever the desired result is that you're after, whether that's additional growth or reducing costs, higher margins, better service. how do you turn the dials really to get the desired result without over constraining yourself? And the way that you get those strategic insights that let you make the big decisions is by using simple unit economics to understand the impact of turning any of those dials. So here's a simple last mile math formula for calculating the impact of optimizing your operations. You start with the operational metrics, number of routes, orders, number of miles, drive time, service time. And you take that and apply the simple unit economics, like what's your revenue per order? How much does fuel cost per mile? What's your maintenance cost per mile? Your labor cost per hour? And when you look at all those things and you do the multiplication and calculate them out, you can see clearly what the financial impacts are going to be of any given decision. So now we're going to run through an example of what that last mile math looks like in practice and getting these strategic insights. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean Stinson. Sean?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy. So as you said, we're gonna run through a couple of examples of scenarios that happened that were really impactful, right? So we're gonna start off with this first one. This particular company was they were running 11 routes, right, to service their customer base, and they were actually contemplating adding another vehicle to support some additional customers they were bringing on. But before making this particular purchasing decision, they came to us to see if there's any way we could help them improve efficiency so that they could possibly handle those additional customers without having to purchase a new vehicle, right? So could they get the work done with the same amount of resources that they had today. So they took a typical day's worth of stops and they ran it through our application as is. So there was no optimization made, no changes. They just put everything in the exact same order they ran it, signed to the same vehicles, and they just wanted to create a baseline of information. So those 11 routes they were running covered 945 miles, and it took them 54 hours a day to complete, right? So in order to determine what that financial impact of optimizing the routes would be, they needed to apply some numbers to both the miles driven, which you might think of as operating cost, and their labor time, which would be maybe windshield time, right? Time behind the wheel. So this would help them understand if it would be better to optimize their routes or to purchase a new vehicle. So they started with a very simple model. They wanted to calculate daily and then extrapolate that out to annual costs. And your numbers are, going to be different if you do this, but to keep it simple and not overinflate the cost points, just used $1 per mile and $15 per hour for labor, right? Which are very conservative numbers, but they wanted to see the impact. So this resulted in a daily cost of 1755 and an annual cost, if you multiply that out, of about $450,000 for those 11 routes to run. So slide. So now that they had their baseline data, it was time to run the same stop data through the Route For Me routing engine to see what that impact of changing their route plans would be. They were more than a bit surprised when they saw that they could actually get to the same number of stops with 6 fewer vehicles and accomplish those stops in less time and less drive miles. So that was a bit of an eye-opener for them. Slide, please. So when they compared the baseline numbers to the optimized numbers, they saw that optimization would cut their vehicle miles by more than half and cut the time that their drivers spent on the road by nearly 20%. So when they did the math, the annual savings totaled up to nearly $180,000. Now, keep in mind they were using very conservative operating costs and labor rates when they did this. I don't have to tell you that they decided to hold off on buying that additional vehicle, right? They were also able to sell off a couple of the extra vehicles and then focus more effort on sales, as they knew they had plenty of bandwidth to handle the additional stops, right? And this exercise helped them to not only reduce the overhead, but also put them in that position to grow smarter. I will add a very small disclaimer here that these results are not typical, right? Normally, we are definitely able to reduce time, drive time and miles, and possibly remove a vehicle from a fleet this size. But traditionally, the larger the fleet, the more vehicles that we can potentially take out of the routes because we can get more efficient with more volume. With that said, the reduction in miles driven and windshield time typically results in an ROI of 3x to 6x of your investment. So that's pretty good math. Slide. So this next example, this is of how one company is using last mile math for strategic network design. So this is a property services company. They optimize their routes daily. They experienced some significant growth. So they started asking some bigger questions like, are our depots in the right locations? How well are we covering each territory? Can we be more efficient when we expand into a new region, right? As we continue to grow. So they used our application to simulate various demand and coverage scenarios. They tested how, it would look if they added a depot into an area, or if they removed one, or maybe if they just relocated it to a different area, how that affected their route efficiency and their driver workload, and actually their overall capacity of ability to handle the loads, right? So the insights that they gained gave them the confidence to make these high impact infrastructure decisions. Like they consolidated some facilities, right? They realized they didn't need to have two in certain areas. They could bring them down into one. They were able to move vehicles from one location to another where they could be better utilized. And then this made them overall more operationally efficient. But now they're also able to support future growth with data-backed logic, right? So this wasn't just operational tuning of the dial, it was also creating a blueprint for long-term scalability. Slide, please. Okay, so this case, this highlights how last mile math can support capital planning and then fleet investment decisions. So what we have here is a food and beverage supplier. They were preparing for growth, knew that the fleet needed an upgrade, and the initial assumption was that they were going to have to replace all 25 of their trucks to service the current business and to allow for future growth. But before pulling that trigger, they ran the simulation, they put the data through our application, very much like the first example that I shared. They were wanting to see could they increase their route density and improve their utilization and what that impact would be. So do they need all 25 vehicles, or can they get away with less? So what they found was that by optimizing their routes, they tightened up their stop sequences, they increased their vehicle utilization. They're actually going to be able to meet that same service levels with just 15 new trucks instead of 25. So that's a 40% reduction in planned capital expenditure without compromising on customer service. And they were able to redirect those savings into other high impact areas of the business, like some warehouse automation, easy for me to say, and some staff training, while also opening up that bandwidth for the sales team to bring on more clients. All right, next slide, please. So we're going to wrap up this section with a great example how a company is using last mile to win new business profitably. So this is a courier that works with pharmacies and different health systems. And in their space, the margins are really thin, and the service expectations are really high, right? So before bidding on a new contract, they're trying to understand something like, can we take this business on, properly serve this customer to their expectation level, and hit our margin targets, right? So that's really important to understand if you're bidding on new business. So using Route for Me, they ran simulated delivery routes, right, for proposed new business. They calculated what that full cost to serve scenario would be. So they looked at fuel, driver labor, service time at each stop, and this was able to give them a clear per delivery cost baseline. So they then use that to price their bids accordingly so it's competitive, profitable, and sustainable. So now, if they win a contract, they know ahead of time they can do the work, make a reasonable profit. If they don't win business and it's due to someone underbidding them, they can move forward without regret, knowing that they made the right business decision. They did not put themselves in a situation where it's a loser. So that's also really good math. So that's what I have for you today. I'm going to hand it back over to Andy.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. And as with Jason, if you have questions for Sean about what he's just presented, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A, and then we're coming up on our Q&A session shortly. Before we get there, though, just a quick section on where to start, how to get started down this road to using last mile math. So let's talk a little bit about how to put it into practice in your organization, because it's not just a theoretical concept. It's really intended to be a practical and repeatable process that starts with what you already have. And what you already have is your data. So that might include all the route plans and telematics and driver logs and service times, whatever you currently collect. And one message that we want to make sure you understand is that you don't need to wait for perfect data. You start with what's available and then improve from there. And often customers are surprised at how much insight they can gain from just a few key data points. And I think we've seen some examples that Jason went over and that Sean showed as well. And then define your metrics. So ask yourself, what does success look like? Is it more on-time arrivals, lower fuel consumption? What are you trying to really accomplish? You need some clear and measurable goals so that you can track your progress and stay aligned across your departments. Make sure that you're aligned with your executive team, your finance team, and so forth. And then you do the analyze and visualize piece of it. And this is where the last mile math really starts to deliver some value. So you can use Route for Me's platform or whatever tools you prefer, but certainly hope we've demonstrated that Route for Me has the capability to provide some of these insights for you. To start doing those comparisons between plan versus actual performance. So visual dashboards, I think, as we've shown, make it easy to spot trends, some outliers, recurring issues that might otherwise stay hidden in spreadsheets. And once you've got that visibility, you can start identifying the areas for improvement, like the examples that Jason walked through, right? Some very concrete examples of where the numbers lead you to make some insights, get some insights about what some improvements might be that you can take in your business. And then you can also start running the simulations, like what Sean just covered. And this, again, is where the last mile math really starts to drive strategic value. You can model what happens if you consolidate depots and so forth, all the examples that Sean just talked about. And this gives you the confidence in your decisions to make those decisions based on data before you make operational changes that are going to have a lasting impact on your operation. And then finally, take action. Measure again, apply the changes, plan, do, check, act. It's a standard business process, a continuous improvement loop. Goals, not just a one-time gain. It's about building a smarter, more resilient operation that gets better over time. And certainly we've seen with many of our customers is that they start chipping away. They tackle one problem, move on to the next, and so forth until you turn around and they've really transformed their business. Just one step at a time, one improvement at a time through going through that continuous improvement loop. And if you ever feel stuck or want to accelerate the process, Route for Me is always here to help, whether you need help setting benchmark or building simulations. This team, Sean and Jason and others within our organization have really done it all before. And the professional services team here at Route for Me is standing by, ready to help you unlock this value faster from strategy and process design, configuration and training. We've literally helped thousands of businesses get measurable results quickly. So as we start to wrap up here and get to our Q&A, I just want to point out some additional resources available to help you on your last mile journey. You can check out our ebook, the definitive guide. We've done some past webinars. Jason and Sean have each hosted a webinar already that provides some great insights that are like extensions of what we've talked about today. And then, of course, you don't hesitate to reach out. We've got Sean and Jason's contact information up there. Don't hesitate to ping them, and we can help you start down this road to using last mile math. So with that, we'll get to our Q&A. Thanks again for joining us. We hope this has helped you see how last mile math could turn logistics into a growth engine for your business. And we'll start opening it up for questions. So let's get our Q&A tab open here. And we'll start looking at some of the questions that we have. So question, maybe Jason, I think this is maybe for you. It's talking about plan versus actual and the extent to which you can drill down in our dashboard or within Route for Me directly. Is it just kind of an informational overview? So I guess maybe the question is like, how do you drill down from what we saw in that dashboard to look at the more granular figures? And Jason, I think that might be for you. And I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. The mute monster popped up and got me. Fantastic question. And so for right now, it's just a top level view It's not currently, you currently don't drill down. It just kind of points you in the right direction. Now, from there, you can, pursue the individual data, but it's kind of just going to point you in a specific direction.
Got it. Okay, thanks, Jason. Um, Sean, here's a question I think for you, probably based on the content. So, when you talk about scenario modeling, how long does it typically take to run one of those simulations in Route for Me?
Oh, yeah, great question. It really, I guess a lot depends on how fast you can click because it's just if you've got the data, specifically if you have a telematics platform already in place, then it's a matter of pulling the historical information out of that and then just running it back through our application. So it takes a matter of, a couple of minutes maybe to pull data through our application to get a route, as is route. Then you pull it back through and you make a couple of changes as far as, requesting the optimization and putting some parameters in there, bang, another, minute or two. And then, do some math, right? So, I can typically, I've been doing this for a while, so I can knock this stuff out in maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Sometimes it depends on how the data comes in on the original data file, so you may have to do a little manipulation there. But it doesn't take long. I mean, at the end of the day, the first one might take you a little longer, but as you kind of do a couple of them, it just becomes, just bang, 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 and you knock them out. And you're able to do some quick math and figure out what the difference is.
Got it. Thanks, Sean. Jason,
Mhm.
maybe another question for you. Person asks, what's the most important metric to start tracking if we're not doing much right now beyond basic delivery times?
So, I mean, that's a fantastic question. And I think it's a it's a multi-pronged approach because what makes that specific question difficult to answer is the preceding question, which should be, what do you value most? Do you value time or do you value miles? And people look at me and they sometimes they'll tilt their head and they say, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, imagine you have a fleet and it costs a lot to operate a vehicle. In that scenario, you might value miles more than you value time. You could have a fleet with highly skilled operators that you pay a lot per hour. In that scenario, you might value time more than you value miles. So I think the most important metric to measure is going to be relative to what matters most to your company and your operational modeling. The really neat thing is by adding Route for Me is you now have a menu to choose from of what metrics do you want to look at and what metrics matter most to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Sean, looks like a good question around simulation here for you. Can you give an example of a time where a simulation didn't justify a change, like where the data said not to do something?
Yeah, every now and again, I'll run into. I was just having this conversation with somebody a couple hours ago. It was so funny. So anyway, we run into scenarios where companies have maybe just only a few stops, four, maybe five, because their service times are longer. And so in that scenario, they're probably more likely to be able to get it right, right? It's really when the math becomes more exponentially difficult when you have more stops and more vehicles. So if I got to put 3 or 4 stops into order, I'm probably going to be better at it manually than if I have to put 10, right? Or 15 or 20. That becomes a whole lot more difficult. So, in a couple of scenarios where I've seen that happen, it's a situation where they've only got a few stops. They've kind of got it dialed in. We run it through. We kind of justify for them, hey, you guys are doing a great job. But with that said, the ability to capture the actual versus plan to see if your drivers are actually doing what you're planning, right? And on a regular basis, and to be able to do some of that coaching you were talking about earlier, Andy, um, and from a historical perspective, to capture that information and look at things moving forward, there's a lot of value in having our application. So it may not just be, can I optimize you and reduce miles and drive time? It could be, let me help you make sure that you're executing as you anticipate. And then maybe as you start to grow, kind of you leverage some of the information to determine how to grow at a smarter rate. So, even though I maybe not justify change, there's still value there potentially for a customer.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Seeing some more questions rolling in. So folks, please do continue to enter your questions using that Q&A tab, and we'll try to answer as many live as we can. And if we can't get to your question during the live event today, then we will do our best to get back to you offline if we have your contact information. So maybe Sean, another question for you. A couple questions around integrations, whether Route for Me is able to integrate with different systems. I had a question around telematics, for example, and ERP. Do you want to take that one on?
Sure. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we're 100% open API, and so you can push pull data in and out of our application. Um, so if the system in question, whether it be an ERP, a CRM, work order management, here in the Q&A, I see like an e-courier service. Um, if they're API capable, then yes, right? The answer is yes. Now, what we don't do a whole lot of is we don't do a whole lot of just, out of the box click, right? We do have some of those like with WooCommerce, some e-commerce sites like that. But most of it, typically we find our customers kind of come to us and say, well, this is great, but I wanted to do this, this, and this as well. And so now we've jumped into a custom integration, right? So we like the customer to maybe really kind of determine what they want, how they want it to work, what information is important to them, what they're trying to get out of it, on the backside. So, that's where the SDK comes in. It's super easy to use. If the customer doesn't have resources to do it internally, we've got third-party integrators we can work with, and Route for Me even has the ability to potentially take that on from a professional services perspective to make that connection happen so that they can transmit that information back and forth. So it's a yes. We just need to have the conversation.
Great, awesome, Sean. Thanks for that. And Jason, maybe a question for you, if you can take one for us here. I think this refers back to a couple slides that you were showing around service time data. So the person asked, how do you typically get the actual service time data? Is it often GPS, or do drivers have to input it manually?
So fantastic question. And the answer is yes. So it kind of depends on what you want. So the truth is you can actually get the answer a couple different ways. So you'll see it the more you get to know Route for Me, it's a recurring theme that just because something's done one way doesn't mean it's the only way. It's one of the benefits of a truly horizontal platform where there's multiple ways to do the same thing. It is possible to get it from the GPS, so the telematics device, for example, or it's also possible to get it from from the driver's behavior. So meaning that they will tap a button that says they've arrived. They will tap a button that says they've departed. We can also detect it from the mobile device if you don't have a GPS telematics. And again, kind of complete the action. So, multiple different ways to kind of gather and get the data. Some are more accurate than others. Ironically, the driver interaction typically paints the best picture because they're the ones that will actually tell you when they started and when they finished with the highest degree of accuracy versus detection. Like we're not using cameras to figure out how many wrench turns they're doing or how many boxes they've delivered and all that kind of fun stuff. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
Awesome, thanks, Jason. Sean, let's ping pong back to you. So a person is asking about how do you prioritize? How do you recommend prioritizing where to start with a plan versus actual analysis? I know Jason covered that part, but I thought we could go back to you for some insights on that.
Sure. I mean, again, Jason made the comment where, what is your priority? What are you trying to do? But it all starts with the historical data. Like if you have the ability to pull that data out of a telematics platform, or if you have it stored somewhere, like we do have customers, we have a lot of customers that come to us that are leveraging like Excel spreadsheets, or they've kind of built it out, maybe even in a Word document. Um, we got to take that information out and be able to put it into a format that we can leverage in our system, preferably CSV or Excel. But that's the big one, right? Is understanding what am I doing today? What is, and it could be if you don't have a telematics device already in your vehicles, all you can do is this is what I plan to do. This is what I told my drivers to do, but I really don't know, which is an additional value of having us in play, especially if we can connect up with a telematics provider. But we do have some, GPS capabilities in the mobile app, so we can give you some of that actual versus planned. I planned for this. I did this. Do they line up, right? So if I can take that, historical information, run it through and get that as is baseline, it starts there, right? It doesn't matter what all you do with the optimization. If I don't have a baseline to compare it with, doesn't really do a whole lot good because you're just guessing, right? So get the baseline data, and when you have the baseline data, then you can take that, run it back through, and put some of those different parameters in, and you can change those parameters. You can run it through, look at it. Well, what if I do it this way? Change the parameters, put more vehicles, less vehicles, more service time, less service time, put time windows in for certain customers, capacity, my trucks only hold this much stuff, right? Whatever. You can make these manipulations and see what the changes are to determine, does it make more sense to you to do it this way versus that way?
Awesome.
So
Thanks,
hopefully
Sean.
that answers the question.
Great. Appreciate it, Sean. Jason, maybe we'll go back to you. A question around the data. What if our data isn't perfect? This person asks, how can they still get some insights if they're missing different pieces of data?
Fantastic question, but I will answer that. But we had some stuff come in on the Q&A that's been coming in live as well. I'm going to go ahead and answer a couple of those questions really quick and then get to that one.
Yep.
So the first question, we'll knock it down really quickly. Can arrival grace periods be adjusted? The answer is not today. But I do believe that is something that could be or can be done in the future. But as far as what's been released today, that is not something that is adjusted. But I will say, as an organization, if there's a customer need and it benefits the platform and it's something that needs to be done, we do get that kind of development work done pretty quickly. So I would say let's have a conversation. Next, we'll fall in that same let's have a conversation vein. So the questions are, can Route4Me pull data from multiple databases, multiple APIs? The answer is yes. So our system is REST-based, and it really comes down to the technical sophistication levied in the integration. So it's kind of going to depend on how the data is and isn't flowing and what you want it to do. But there are instances today where we are connected to a multitude of different systems in different ways. Is the data stored in a way that complies with GDPR? So for those of you that aren't familiar with GDPR, GDPR is the European Data Standard for User Privacy. And the answer is yes, we are GDPR compliant. And the statement was made that in most companies that are in Europe, they ask that the data is saved within servers that are in the EU. Is that possible? And the answer to that question is also yes. That does include and comes with a conversation that I would suggest we have, because the localization of data is a very specific requirement. And to set the right expectation, that usually comes with with certain expectations and I would say requirements from the company that we would definitely want to understand, because it is different. So for example, companies in Germany might have a different requirement than companies in Norway, or if it's a governmental agency versus a private company. So there's a bunch of different things like that, in addition to the possibilities around anonymized data. So those are the live questions. So in addition to the other question, those came in ahead of this one. So now this one popped in and it was like, hey, what if my data is not perfect? Can we still get useful insights if we're missing some pieces? The answer to that, honestly, is measuring something is better than measuring nothing. So as long as you're getting some type of data, you have a possibility for continual improvement. If it isn't measured, it isn't managed, is something you've heard probably on this call a couple times, and it's something I will refer back to. So data is not perfect. You can still get insights, not a big deal. The critical part, though, I will say, is your data needs to improve over time, because there's an age-old computer adage I learned back in high school that I will share. garbage in, garbage out. So you need to keep that in mind when you're putting data into the system. It will only give you the outputs you ask for. So if you are feeding the system really, really bad data, don't be surprised if you get less than useful insights on the way out. Just to level set the expectations.
Great, thanks, Jason. And maybe Jason, we'll just stay with you for. I think we probably have time for one more question. And person is asking about what's the typical timeline for seeing improvements or measurable improvements after implementing Route for Me.
So that one's a tricky one, and the reason why it's tricky is because there's a couple variables that we need to take into account. So I will say that you can realize and see ROI potential almost immediately, which is great. The fact that we can see it. To actually see it in your bottom line comes down to how you navigate your change management and how quickly your drivers and your planners and your systems and stuff can adopt. I will say for small businesses, typically, we've seen implementations, rollouts, and trainings happen in less than a week where they're starting to realize benefit. Medium and larger size organizations, the number is going to be as varied and as different as the organizations themselves. Some of them super, super quick, some of them not so quick. If you already have, for example, a route optimization tool, which we have, we come up against scenarios where people are looking to upgrade their tech and we are the upgrade option. That leads them from, let's say, to immediate savings because there already exists workflows where we're now just giving them better outcomes. Different things like increased density and all that kind of fun stuff. But, the answer could be immediately, and the answer could be it might take a minute.
Got it. Thanks, Jason. Well, I think we've probably come to back up to the top of the hour. Unless Sean or Jason, do you see any more questions? That I think we've answered everything. With that, I want to thank everyone again for joining us. You can look for more educational last mile webinars coming down the pike from Route for Me. If you have any follow-up from the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us. I want to thank my two Route for Me colleagues, our routing experts, Jason Johnson and Sean Stinson, for joining us today. And of course, I want to thank all of you for joining us as well. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.